Exorcist Fairy and Itorah are two beautiful looking Metroidvanias, but they are sadly lacking a bit in game design. Exorcist Fairy starts with a big problem right away, unless you speak Chinese. The default language is Chinese, so changing it to English in the main menu is difficult. To change it to English, you select the second option and then you press right to change it to English. Luckily, most of the game is translated to English, except the achievements and the ending. It's not always translated perfectly, but that didn't really bother me. I really enjoyed the visuals, and the level design was pretty great at the beginning. Areas felt interconnected and discovering secrets by destroying fake walls was fun. The difficulty was pretty fair as well, except for a few boss fights that felt like damage sponges if you didn't upgrade your damage enough. But I have to say that I really enjoyed like 75% of this game. It started to become frustrating when you have to enter an area where you have to use this wall climb ability. But instead of just normal wall climbing or jumping, you stick your sword in specific looking walls. This ability wasn't really that responsive, and the game punishes you in certain areas if you fall down, with losing a lot of progress. This became frustrating very easily, and like I said, it felt unfair, and it made me enjoy the game less. There's another area where this huge skull is following you, and where you have to dodge annoyingly moving tiny heads, and at the same time where you have to wall climb your way up with this finicky ability. Well, obviously not a fun time, and even though I managed to beat these areas, they still felt like unfair game design, and it was challenging for the wrong reasons. I also disliked a few boss fights at the end. They were very random, and some attacks were almost impossible to dodge. Without some health or damage upgrades, you will probably just give up on these boss fights. The last 25% of the game felt a bit rushed, and didn't offer me the same high quality gameplay as the rest of the game did. Itorah is overall a pretty well made Metroidvania, but it's sadly pretty generic. The combat is slow and repetitive. The difficulty is a bit too easy for my liking. I didn't lose all my health once, for example, and the unlocked abilities are nothing to rave about. The different areas are pretty cool, but I never felt challenged by the level design, because you barely lose any health if you screw up. The same goes for all the boss fights. They were visually pretty stunning, but beating them was just a bit too easy in my opinion. Especially with this ground pound ability that lets you deal more damage than normal attacks and also makes you just bounce up if you manage to land on an enemy. I do have to say that your weapon is pretty nice visually, but I wish you could upgrade its damage, or that you could unlock more fight moves, just to make the combat a bit more fast paced and definitely more enjoyable. Itorah has a beautiful world for you to uncover, but the easy difficulty and the bland repetitive combat really make the world less interesting. Itorah definitely feels more like a complete game than Exorcist Fairy does, but the flawed gameplay doesn't make it a better game. I guess I would rate both these games the same. They are decent, but not great. I would still recommend Itorah to casual players who aren't really familiar with Metroidvanias. I feel like this game is a pretty nice introduction to these kind of games. I also would still recommend Exorcist Fairy to the veteran Metroidvania player. It may feel like an unfinished game overall, but it still introduces you to enough challenges, and the abilities and the combat are more enjoyable and diverse for sure. I already warned you about the wall climbing ability and some areas that require this ability. But despite these flaws, this game really felt like Hollow Knight from time to time. It tries some new mechanics here and there, and I can only respect that. So in general, Exorcist Fairy and Itorah are nice looking but flawed Metroidvania games that I can only recommend to a specific audience. Itorah is probably overall a more polished game, but it doesn't try something new, and therefore it becomes generic. And Exorcist Fairy feels like an unfinished game, but it dares to take more risks, and that's why it's not always the most enjoyable game, but for sure an interesting game. My advice would be to wait for these games to be on sale. They are decent Metroidvanias with beautiful visuals, and most importantly, a pretty good time if you know what to expect.